Hi, my name is Gene Monterastelli, and the video you are about to watch is a recording from the 24 Hours of Tapping, which is an event that is held annually to support the Peaceful Heart Network. If you appreciate or learn anything from this video, the easiest way for you to say thank you is to support the work of the Peaceful Heart Network, who has worked with over 300,000 migrants, immigrants, prisoners, folks in disaster areas by bringing tapping to them. As you watch the video, across the bottom, you will see a link where you can support their amazing work. And I hope you enjoy this conversation. Dr. Craig Weiner has been a healing art practitioner for nearly 40 years. He is the chair of the Board of Trustees of EFT International. Craig and his partner and wife, Alina Frank, run the EFT Tapping Training Institute. It's always very, very fun when you have a dyslexic going to read everybody's bio. And our training and our trainers of EFT Matrix Reimprinting and directors of the EFT and are the directors of EFT Nation Podcast. Please welcome to the digital stage, my friend Craig. Hi, Craig.
Hi, Gene. You are right on time to the minute. Love that.
We're going to get there. You know, the only way that we're going to get through 30 blocks over 24 hours is if we make sure the trains run on time and we do all of this goodness. So I appreciate you being here.
My pleasure.
One of the questions that I'm going to be asking a lot, because I'm not super concerned by what people do. I'm interested in why people do it. And so as we're putting an event together like this, when we reach out to people and we invite them to come along, we're always asking, why is this topic interesting to you? So before we dive in and start dissecting and talking about what limiting beliefs are and where they are and how we transform them, why is this something that you are interested and passionate about?
Yeah, that's a great beginning question. And I just want to say, listening to you, and number one, just a real acknowledgement for the work that Peaceful Heart is doing and your involvement. And, it brought back actually memories when I was a child of the Jerry Lewis. Do you remember every year when Jerry Lewis?
This is my version of the Jerry Lewis telethon. Literally, that's where that idea came from.
My family every year tuned into that fundraiser, the Jerry Lewis Foundation. And so I was just seeing you through that and that kind of impact, because it went into the millions and millions, and it's a couple decades ago. So may this just keep growing, and the work you're doing just keep growing and having that kind of an impact. I love that. So thank you for the immense amount of work that it takes to put this on. Nobody knows exactly but you, but I have some sense. So thank you so much.
I appreciate
and Elaine and the crew and everybody behind the scenes. So anyway, I just wanted to really take a moment. Why this inspires me. I think that it is one of the most powerful, I don't want to say underrated, underrespected notions in the world for how and what we are and do and believe and act and behave in the world. I think in the EFT world, we do appreciate it. Right. We hear about limiting beliefs. We hear about core beliefs, and it's kind of like it almost becomes jargon. But out in the real world, not as much. And the idea that when people start to be able to name their beliefs, not as facts, not as who they are, not things that are written in stone about that's just the way I am, but they start to have a different relationship to it, as in, wow, this is a belief that I have. This is something that I've come to, but it isn't necessarily me. I am not stuck with this. I don't have to keep viewing the world and behaving through this lens. So I think that the potential impact of people transforming their relationship with their beliefs has never-ending implications for healing society, community, family, personal, everything. So it's just so big.
And I think one of the things that we take for granted when we talk about beliefs is we don't operate them as beliefs. We operate as no's. K-N-O-W. Not like, no, I can't do this, but this is, intellectually I might understand this is a belief that I have about something, but we don't operate as a belief. We operate as something that we know. And if it's something we know, therefore it must be static. Therefore it must be even like that I can't get out of this thing because it is so entrenched inside of what is going on. And just like taking a step back and actually listening to the word belief. that's a curious word that I'm engaging with this particular thing.
Right. And I think even just naming it that way, because as you said, whether it's a no, whether we say it's a fact, I am just this way. The world is that way. And I have lots of proof for that, the more strongly held the belief is, the closer and closer it becomes to actually becoming a fact.
Yeah.
There's not actually a negotiation here. It's not a belief. It's just so. And the closer it gets to being so, then the more immutable it seems. And I don't even question whether it is a belief anymore, because that's just the way it is. So I think even just recognizing when something is a belief is an important first step.
And I think as you were talking about, I believe this about myself, I believe this about the world. I think the biggest bear trap I step into is I believe A about everybody else, and I believe B about myself. Then I'm able to go, you're not stuck in that thing. You can overcome this thing. And I'm able to see context and compassion and opportunity for the people around me. And I oftentimes can be a champion of encouragement and advice and all of those things to help them over that. And then when I look interior, it's something that like becomes stuck because, well, of course this is the way it is, because it's coming from inside of me. And like you said, I have this history of, I can point to this entire history where this is true and this is true and this isn't true and this is true. And
that's kind of that what do I want to say, like that hamster wheel. So in other words, these deeply, deeply ingrained ideas about myself, about the world, about people, about all the different lenses that we're looking through, they become the unconscious foundation of my thoughts. My thoughts like grow out of that soil. My feelings come out of that soil. My behaviors come out of the soil that's infiltrated with that virus, that however you want to look at it. And because they're developed so often when we're young, right? And they're so often, the deepest ones come out of childhood. And it's almost like they're neurally wired into us and they become a part of who I amness. That then everything gets seen through that. But you're right, because often we put on different parameters for others and we're much different for ourselves, right? I can see somebody else and says, what do you mean you're stupid? You're brilliant. You're like the smartest person I know. How could you possibly think you're not smart enough? And meanwhile, I've got 2 PhDs working on the third one, being driven by the idea that maybe someday I'll be smart enough to have,
Right.
Yeah, you're right. We have very different measures that we apply to others and ourselves. Yeah, good point.
So with that kind of, I guess for lack of a better word, treacherous terrain as we're engaging with that, how then, so I have this tool that is tapping. I know it can create transformation. I've seen it in other people. Maybe I'm believing it can happen for me as well. Okay. How then, what does a process look like, or not even what does a process look like? What is the initial step that we take as we're battling this thing that lives back here in my software that says this is an immutable truth, even if intellectually I don't believe that to be true?
Sure. And that can happen a lot of different ways. I mean, I also want to say, EFT doesn't own the concept of core beliefs. I mean,
right.
Most other psychotherapy, CBT, et cetera, have, this is a strong foundation of many different transformative approaches. But it's also a powerful one used in EFT and tapping and matrix and all the other tapping energy psychology modalities. So, one of the ways that when I work with clients, sometimes people are very clear on occasion, and they have, through their journaling, their reading, their spiritual work, et cetera, have come to the realization, I have this really strong belief that I want, or a block that I want to work on. Now that happens sometimes. Most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time people, I think, are struggling with a particular challenge in their life, their relationship, their work, an addiction, physical illness, whatever it is. And for me, often the belief kind of pokes through, right? When we listen, especially when we're a witness or an observer, it's easier to hear them say, it's like, I just don't think I'll ever be able to really fix this. I don't think that I'm, and you start to hear it starts to peek through in their language. The I'm not good enough version, right? The I'm not smart enough, that I'll never be this enough. The world will never see me that way. I don't deserve love. I don't deserve, to really have happiness. All these different kinds of beliefs sneak through in people's language. And so I think when we're good EFT practitioners and we're listening to people, we can often hear those beliefs before they do. And so that's one. I think that, you could create sheets and questionnaires working with somebody or for yourself. And, there are books that you could journal about and write about. Here's the things that I think, and have prompts. For example, do I feel capable of? Where are areas in my life? So I think that one can do exercises for that and questionnaires. I think that I like to just work organically with clients and see how it starts to show up, because I believe it begins to peek through when the person is feeling safe enough to say them. Yeah. And they kind of start to bubble up and I start to hear them more. And often I'll reflect back. It's like, so, I know you came to quit smoking. I know you came to me to work on this physical illness. I know, but I keep hearing you say I don't think that I have what it takes to do it, or whatever that is. Does that feel true to you? And so often, when they hear me say it, it's like, wow, and usually there's a balance. I hear you say that, and intellectually, I know that's not true, but it kind of feels like it is.
Yeah.
Right. So so they're starting to present and tune in and start to present. That's, as you said, that unconscious, that psyche, and whether you're tapping on positive or negative, that subconscious is going to come through and say, yes, you are worthy. Yes, you are lovable. Yes, you are an amazing person. Yeah. Or no, you're not. I know, but other people may not. We call these tail enders in EFT.
Yep.
When we're tapping on something, a positive statement, but there's a part of ourselves that isn't congruent with that, there's going to be kind of this little voice in the back that goes, you don't deserve that. You'll never have that. You're never going to make it to be that successful. So they can come up. These beliefs can show up in a variety of different ways in a session or in one's personal work.
And I think what's interesting in there is this idea that if I have something that I emotionally believe is true, that I may or may not intellectually believe is true, yeah. If I am simply saying that belief and I'm tapping at the exact same time, right, that's the only thing I need to do. I don't believe I'm ever going to do this. I don't believe I'm ever going to do this. I don't believe I'm ever going to do this. I don't believe I'm ever going to do this. And as I say that and as I tap, it's almost like water going over sandstone, where I can just slowly see it starting to lose its integrity and its hold. And even as my words continue to be declarative, I don't believe this. I don't believe this is going to happen, that I can almost feel it softening by just giving myself permission to say it out loud without having to transform it, without having to reframe it, without having to do anything else. And all of a sudden, because we're bringing this power through tapping to that particular thing, it starts to just quickly become proportionate before we do anything else.
I think that, when we start to say, I'll bring up analogies. We talk about tabletops, big topics, big issues in our life. And if we're working on, I'm trying to create a new relationship. I've been through 3 failed marriages and I still really want a beautiful relationship. Yep. But I'm facing a history of failure at that, right? In other words, and so one of the things that I find, though, that I'm careful of is, while we might begin to even though I deserve, to have an amazing, rich, rewarding relationship, sometimes if we tap on something too big, it becomes overwhelming, because I have so much history and so many thoughts and neural networks of evidence against that it's just the hell with it. I'm not tapping, I can't even go there. It's too big. So while it can be useful to help us tune in, I don't think that's the way that ultimately resolves the underlying belief. And so while we may begin with something more global and bigger and a bigger concept, ultimately, part of our psyche is going to have to kind of break it down. And as we say, you don't eat the whole elephant at once. You find one piece at a time. It's a bad analogy for vegetarians, but you know what I mean? We got to find, okay, so give me an example of that. Give me a time and what happened that you kind of created, that this belief got created in, and let's start to work through that. And that's what EFT is really beautiful at is like when we get specific and we can start to create these shifts of understanding and insight and self-compassion. That's the beauty that starts breaking apart the dam that has been built up over so much time that has turned this concept into a fact for us, right?
And so then, Julie just did a beautiful job of demonstrating how we tap on anxiety. How then do we tap on a limiting belief? Not big global one. I got a tiny one. I got a bite-sized piece of this particular thing. What does that look like? Because when it's an emotion, it becomes really easy. I feel this emotion, and this is how it feels in my body.
I'm going to always say, give me some proof of that.
Yeah.
I'm not, like, I hear you saying I'm not level. So one of the things that we do, because I know we're speaking both to EFT practitioners that are going to know certain things, but we also are, aficionados and people newer to EFT. So one of the things I want to get before I'm working on a belief, let me back up for a second. People normally come to me, or when I'm teaching practitioners, people come because of a problem or challenge they're facing, right? And they haven't named a belief yet. So we work on progress with that. But then sometimes what will happen as we do the deeper work is they'll realize, okay, not only am I just annoyed by what he did and he didn't keep his word, and should I leave him? Should I stay? Should I go? Whatever, relationship issue. And then what starts to emerge is that tender underbelly of, maybe I just don't deserve love. Okay, as an example. Now, for me, we've now turned the table much deeper from when they first came in, because they came in maybe to resolve some issue or some annoying habit or something. But now we're going much deeper. So one of the things I'm always careful as a practitioner is okay, well, if we're going to go there, that's not exactly why you came in.
Yeah.
You came in for this. We're going to be going here, and that's going to be going much more vulnerable, much deeper. And I just want to make sure I have permission. And do you think that if we worked on this belief, that's going to help you with why you came in to see me?
Yeah. And what you're saying inside, what it sounds like what you're saying inside of that is, to take it from a slightly different perspective from the person who's coming in, is there's certainly people who are transformationally fluent, who understand limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
A lot of times what we're trying to do is we're starting with a symptom, not a root cause.
Right.
And what you're describing there, it sounds like we're starting with a symptom. I am not taking this action. I am taking this action. He says this, I get triggered this way emotionally.
Right.
And so the conversation is about what is happening on the surface. And as we explore why is that? Well, what proof do you have? Why do you believe that particular thing? Then we're getting into what is the symptom is the flowers, and we're starting to figure out what are the roots inside of that particular system as we're going down gently. And I think you're pointing to something really important inside of that is, just because as we're doing this process and information presents itself, it doesn't mean that we are necessarily ready to seize the information that has presented itself. I have, just because of experience, for the most part, I have a pretty good gauge when I'm tapping on my own. Because when I'm tapping on my own, what I'm having to do is I'm having to be honest about what is going on. I'm having to be thoughtful about what the process is, and I'm having to hold the container to keep me safe to do that particular thing. Right. Yeah. And for some things, I can do that. For other things, I get to a point, it's I can't go there. The same is true when we are acting as an informal or a formal helper, where we get to a point and all of a sudden it's oh, I am not qualified to do that. Or we get to a point where the person who's experiencing this is not in the resource state to actually dive into the thing that we have worked our way to. Just because it's there doesn't mean it's the thing I'm supposed to be working on with this person, with myself, or in this particular moment.
Yeah, because sometimes all of a sudden it dropped to something really deep, and it's oh, I didn't know we were going to go here.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was going to go that deep. So I'm always careful to make sure I get permission before we go there. Number one, do they think it's going to help why they came in? And two, are they feeling sufficiently resourced and ready to do that? Because when we start opening those deep doorways of, can I really trust myself?
Yeah.
Am I really worthy of having this? Those deeper questions. I just want to tread cautiously and carefully and gently, right? I think that's really important. And sometimes I know where it's going and the person may not know yet. So
Right.
I just want to caution even earlier practitioners, is that just because we hear somebody say a belief out loud doesn't mean they're necessarily ready to go there yet.
Yeah, and I want to be really careful that you're not talking about repressed memories that come popping up. That's not what you're talking about. You're talking about this circumstance where, like where we're getting this sense of visibility and clarity about our own internal structure of how we see and understand the world, and we see and understand ourselves. And sometimes like that revelation can be too much for us in this particular moment. And not that it's unuseful for us to know that, but it might be, And the other thing that, like, I have a priority stack that I work through as a practitioner. And the priority stack is it safe?
Yep.
Is it ethical?
Yep.
Is it helpful?
Good. I like
And
that.
we don't get to the third layer of that priority stack unless we answer yes to the first and second layer of that priority stack.
Well said. Because I hear sometimes, we begin with somebody, we don't know everything about them, and we know some limited piece, and all of a sudden we start hearing a belief like the world isn't safe. I can't trust men, or something that now all of a sudden the little hairs on the back of our head start going off, is like, ooh, this could be going into directions that really have some traumatic origins here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to proceed cautiously. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to make sure they feel safe. So I just want to say that just because we hear belief, it isn't like, okay, there we go, we got a good belief.
Yeah.
Let's go, right?
I mean, I have a super tangible example from my own experience. I was working with a client who was living in North America, who had grown up in Eastern Europe under oppressive regimes, and she was a statuesque, model-esque, beautiful woman who had to learn how to pass through the world in a very, very small way.
Okay.
And that was not information I had at the beginning.
Okay.
I had, the world is not safe. And if we start going, the world is actually safe, we're not acknowledging any of that unknown history that is there. And, just because I can doesn't mean I should. Like, there's so much more context that is there. And the other thing that I love that you said inside of last couple of answers, where you kept going, does this serve the reason why we sat down to have this particular session? This is one of the reasons why, this is one of the two reasons why I never particularly love the Palace of Possibilities, or the personal peace procedure, where you got a notebook and you wrote down every horrible thing that happened to you. Well, there were two consequences to that for me. Number one, and I can remember the yellow notebook that I bought from Staples that this was in, and I can tell you exactly where it was in my apartment in Baltimore, because if it got out of the corner of my eye, my stomach churned just looking at all the grossness that was like documented in that book. I'm not saying it doesn't work for everybody. One of the reasons why it didn't work for me, but the other was, just because something in my past was painful or harmful, doesn't mean it's the useful thing for me to be and it's not even healthy. Is it the useful thing for me? Go back to our priority stack. Is it safe? Is it ethical? Is it useful? And I love that you keep asking the question, okay, is going after this issue serving the purpose why I sat down to tap today? It's one of the reasons why every single time when I sit down to tap on my own, I state an intention. I am tapping to downregulate my anxiety so I can be present to the details that I have in front of me today. I'm sitting down to tap so that I can take this action that I've been putting off. I'm sitting down to tap because this pain in my hip has really been a pain in my butt. And by having that, when I work with clients, first question I always ask them, how can I be helpful today? And what they don't realize inside of that question is, I am getting a thesis statement that I get to ask questions of what the intention is. And I love the fact that you keep going, okay, the thing that came up, does it serve the reason why we're doing this right now? And using that as our guide, not just because it's presented itself.
And when we do that, I look at this I have this metaphor of a trees, and there are branches that have lots of different little branches and beliefs of like, oh, I'm never going to make it in this place. I'm never going to get that job. I'm never going to be able to break this money figure. I'm never going to be like, we have lots of different limiting beliefs that aren't necessarily facts, but the core beliefs go down to the trunk of the tree and the roots. And it's like, I'm never going to succeed at life.
Yeah.
I don't belong here. The world isn't a safe place to be. So when we look at those core beliefs, I also want to manage expectations, because people are used to, let's say, working on one small twig, and wow, at the end of the session, I'm good.
Yeah.
But when we have a core belief that has evolved over a lifetime and has gathered lots and lots of evidence for being true, I want to also be appropriate to pacing the potential that this may be taking a longer period of time than what we did last week, which was like done in a minute. So that's a really important piece as well, to understand that the way that we see ourselves or the world or relationship, those big things, take a little bit more time. And so it's okay to go slower with that as well.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, the thing that's crystallizing in my mind is, you were talking about this idea of, I have all of this proof why this is true.
Right.
And so often what we do is we think of, I have the issue that is, I don't love myself, which is an honest statement that I could say out loud.
Okay.
But from my lived experience, that is not an issue. That is a constellation of issues that I have grouped together, and it is understandable, and I'm not being dishonest, like it is useful for me to think in terms of my body, and it's useful for me to think in terms of my heart. Like, those are two different lenses. So when I describe like, boy, I don't feel well, that is a true statement, which is different than my hip hurts, my elbow hurts. I have, like all of these different pieces of it that comes out is, I don't feel good in my body in this particular moment. And because we are in a circumstance that we are working with a tool that has reduced friction to relief versus other things, it's really easy for us to create unrealistic expectations of what is going on. And in what you're talking about, in the rate in which we have transformation, but also in the physical capacity for transformation in a given day. I was in Peru years ago and was asked to work with someone. After 90 seconds of tapping, he slept for 16 hours. Like, that was the physical capacity that he had for transformation in that particular moment. And I think one of the things that you're pointing to so beautifully is that when we're thinking about limiting beliefs, to immediately start, at least what I do, and what you're saying is, I immediately start recalibrating my expectations of what is going to be achieved, because we start creating these artificial timelines. The timeline of a round of tapping, the timeline of a session, the timeline of 3 sessions of a lifetime. And like, those are like, my sessions primarily are 30 or 60 minutes because I need to organize my day. And that's a 30-minute session is an artificial amount of time because I have a calendar so people can schedule with me. And since it's an artificial amount of time, I can't have a concrete outcome that I know is going to happen from that particular thing. And so I love the fact that you're like unpacking and saying, okay, this might take time, and that's okay, and that's healthy.
Yes, it's important. And I think that in that also, it garners more self-compassion and patience. Yeah, which is such an important part of our work, isn't it? That I deeply and completely accept myself, or whatever version we're using, is I think it's such an important part of all forms of EFT, in the process of doing the work, that we become more gentle with our souls, that we take better self-care, that we move toward, I really am doing the best I can, and I always have. And so, now all of a sudden, whether I can't trust myself or trust others. I remember a teacher of mine once said, you can't trust other people. And I remember being shocked at the moment. He's like, you can barely trust yourself. You say you're going to do that. Like, you can't even trust your word, and you're going to try to trust another. But what you can trust is that you're doing the best you can with what you have in the moment. And so is everybody else.
And I
And
think continue. Go ahead. I'm sorry for
yeah,
interrupting.
and so I think that a lot of this work, when we're doing the deeper belief work, we want to relate it to, number one, how it's affecting me now and how that's showing up in my life and what evidence. So,
Yeah.
so when we're working on that. But when we truly start to transform that lens of that belief, and it's no longer, when we measure it, have 0 to 100% or whatever, and it's really doesn't have that power of us, it's really starting to look through the world and attract very different outcomes and very different experiences.
Yeah.
So I find that when we do deep belief work that results in change, what gets dropped out, and this for me personally was huge, was the trying. I'm not trying to be different. I'm not trying to do that anymore. That's just the way it's showing up in my life now. Things actually show up easily for me. It's like, wow, how did that just like, I didn't ask somebody to be nice. I didn't ask them to do this, but all of a sudden, it starts becoming the level of almost a level of expectation. Like, I actually expect it to go smooth and easily. I expect people to like me. I expect, because it comes out of a brand new wave of experiences that then grow in that new way, and so that's what I love. I spent so much of my life trying to be different and trying to be better and trying to fix this and it never works. It feels not even good, but it feels like I have to. But when we really change those, is like, I am lovable, I am worthy, I do get to have what I want, I can be successful. It's like, why not? And so it really shifts a whole worldview. And you can't point to, like, oh, I'm doing this differently. It kind of becomes the air you breathe.
And what I love is, as you are doing that, you're talking about this vision, you took off your sense of taking your glasses off. One of my favorite things when I'm tapping with someone is like, what do you notice? And it's like, the room's brighter.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening is, as we're relaxing, those tiny little muscles in our eyes are relaxing as we're leading fight, flight, or freeze, which means that our pupils are dilating properly. And all of a sudden, I am seeing the world more clearly, not because the room is more clear, but because my eyes are dilating properly to the amount of light that is in the room. And so it's like all of a sudden I've gone from standard definition to high definition when I look out the window and I'm looking at the trees and what is going on. And like, that very physical thing shows up metaphorically, where I don't see this as a challenge. I see it as an opportunity. I don't see this as something to run from. I see it with a sense of curiosity. And if I'm not running and I see it with a sense of curiosity, the context can be exactly the same. Like, none of the facts can be different, but it's a different lived experience, because I am seeing and I am interpreting what is going on in a radically different way, because I am more comfortable inside of my own skin. I recognize it's not life and death like I used to think it is, or whatever that story is that we're engaging with, that particular piece.
Yeah. I mean, when I walk through a life of feeling like the world is unsafe, I will constantly notice those things that are unsafe.
Yeah.
I will
Confirmation
be on high
bias.
alert. I will be on high alert for people and situations that may be dangerous. It is, there's no judgment about that. That's just a learned behavior and a learned way to see the world. And when I'm coming from that place, because of my past experiences of lack of safety, and boundaries being eroded and broken, et cetera, all of those things, then I walk through life gaining tons of evidence for why the world is unsafe. And there's plenty out there. And, when we do start to experience, through tapping it, et cetera, the work of starting to feel safe within ourselves, and then safe within relationship and safe within our community, et cetera, it's kind of there's that magic that starts to show up of circles and circles of evidence of safety.
Yeah. And
We attract that, we see that, we resonate with it where we couldn't even recognize and see that before. It's the ships, that are sailing out there that we couldn't see, that we now can see clearly. So yes.
Yeah. It's not that seeing is believing, but we see what we believe.
Right. Absolutely.
I have confirmation bias. Like whatever I am biased towards, I am going to find proof in my environment and my lived experience. This is going to go badly. Well, I walk out of there. My first thought was, yes, this particular piece of it went badly. And I might not recognize the 87 things that went right, but I went in with the disposition, this is going to go badly. I'm going to be judged. Someone's not going to like it. And I'm going to notice the one crinkled nose. I'm going to notice the one comment that may have been snide or not, but I'm going to perceive it in that way and forget and miss everything else in that particular engagement.
I agree. One of the things I would look to when you're doing your work, whether you're doing your own tapping or with the practitioners, we all have certain key events in our life, and it's not only the emotional affect and experience that we have and bodily sensations, but I would ask myself, and this is a key question we always ask in Matrix Reimprinting, is what decision did I create in that moment? In those highly emotional, intense moments, whether adverse or traumatic, what belief or decision or strategy did I adopt in that moment?
Yeah.
In order to proceed in the world. And we can find those are, because they're often at those highly dramatic, adverse moments that we create those survival strategies or decisions about the way I am or the world is or people are. And those are key moments to look to. But I also want to say one other thing that's an important one, is that I hear a lot of people saying, yeah, but I still feel not good enough to some degree. I still feel this and that. And I've been working at this for years now. And I've been right. Yep. In other words, I want to allow for that. And we couldn't probably all name one of those. So I'll credit Carl Dawson with this, but he came up with the hypothesis of the one belief. And what he says is, we kind of have one guru belief. Mm-hmm. Like it's the teacher and the mentor that we will have throughout a lifetime that will be that reflection in the world that will keep giving us opportunities to learn and grow and evolve from.
Yep.
When I look at it through that lens, and I don't have to beat myself up to go, oh, there's still a part. Oh, there it shows up again. God, I thought I was done with this already. I've tapped so much on this. And I kind of look at that as the sand, in the oyster shell that creates the pearl. It's like, okay, but that contrast doesn't show up nearly as often, or it's not like the world is hitting me over the head with a 2x4 anymore, but it's like, oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so there's something there, and I'm not going to say that we can't resolve beliefs, because I've seen it, but I do think that there's something also about giving ourselves compassion for the part of us that has one primary that keeps offering opportunities to learn and grow and evolve from during this human experience. So I also want to allow for that people might be feeling, experiencing.
And I think the thing that's interesting about that story that runs our life, I am not lovable, I am not worthy, whatever that thing is that shows up as that chord over and over and over again. I think for those of us who are doing transformation, one of the reasons why it shows up over and over and over again is because as I make a space safer, I then go to the edge of that particular space. And then I make that safe, like I might not be, I want to work on my fear of public speaking. So I'm not comfortable speaking up in a meeting. Well, we do some tapping and all of a sudden I feel comfortable speaking up in the meeting, but I'm not comfortable leading the meeting. And so I'm still going, I have this fear of public speaking. Then I'm comfortable leading the meeting, but I'm not comfortable leading the meeting if the entire division is there. And I'm like, I'm still not comfortable. This tapping thing isn't working. I'm still not comfortable with this public speaking, because what happens is, because I have this sense of freedom, I play in the playground that is it. And I am inevitably, I can remember this as a child, no matter what playground I was on, at some point, I would find myself at the edge of the playground, looking out and seeing what was outside of the playground, because this was the known and that's the unknown. Yeah. And so when I create this capacity for growth of feeling loving, feeling worthy, feeling capable, feeling whatever those things are, I'm going to naturally step into it. And as I naturally step into it, I'm going to find another barrier and I'm going to find another barrier. And I think this is the reason why, for me, it's so important that I'm documenting my own journey, because I can miss the transformation. Because it's so hard to remember. I had this experience with a client. We had done 5 or 6 sessions. And at the beginning of the session, he said, we need to have a conversation. I'm like, great, what's going on? And he said, I want you to know that I really appreciate your work. I've learned a lot from you. At the end of every single session, I always feel better, but I don't know if we're making any progress. And I'm like, awesome. And I opened the Google Doc in which he had typed his intake, not notes I took. He wrote these words and I read them out loud to him. And he said, "Oh, I was just exaggerating." Like, he called himself he wasn't saying I'm a liar, but that's what he said. He said, I was lying about that because the letting go of a barrier, it's like shoes that are too tight. Like, I take them off and I can still feel them for 10 or 12 minutes and then I don't notice them anymore. And then 2 days later, I put the dumb shoes back on because I don't remember that they're too tight. Like, because we don't remember that sense of release. And so I think that's part of the challenge we have when we're doing this work around limiting beliefs, is that it's easy to forget how constricting it was in the past. And we only remember how it is constricting today.
I agree. And I think this is where it moves into a spiritual journey. It becomes existential.
Yeah.
And it becomes, for me, it's almost like spirit, universe, however you want to say, will keep offering you the opportunity to be bigger and grow and overcome.
Yeah.
It will keep offering you those opportunities. You still think you're not quite good enough?
Yeah.
I'm going to give you another opportunity to prove that you are.
Yeah.
And that part never gives up on us. Now, we may fall down a lot and we may we may hit walls with that and we may garner proof, see, there I am again. But the universe doesn't ever give up on us. God, universe, whatever, spirit doesn't give up, and it keeps presenting those opportunities to reflect back to each of us just how amazing and beautiful and capable we are. Yeah. And sometimes that feels like, and sometimes it feels like pure ecstasy, right? When we're able to meet that. So I really see that as we do our work, it moves more and more in that direction of that bigger and bigger part that, that you're saying. The fence gets further and further out and more beautiful.
I had a spiritual director years and years ago who cautioned me for saying prayers to be patient. Because if you pray for patience, you are inviting the universe to give you opportunities to demonstrate the fact that you are capable of being patient. And I love this. I've never thought about it this way, but the universe isn't giving me obstacles. The universe is giving me opportunities for me to prove my limiting belief is wrong, because I have an opportunity to overcome it and show up in new ways, to add a new piece of proof that you were talking about earlier. Like, I have all of these stories that I'm pointing to, which certainly isn't the library of my experience, but they're the ones I'm going to, like, I live in a 6th floor walk-up. Fancy way in New York of saying that I live in the 6th floor and there's no elevator. So, and living here over 13 years, I've literally walked up over 1 million steps. I did the math one day because that's the way my brain works. I walked up and down those stairs twice today. I don't have any recollection of that. I can tell you the 3 times in this building I've tripped on those stairs. I can tell you who was present. I can tell you which dog barked at me one of the times. And I can tell you the exact shape of the puddle of milk that was created when I dropped the quart of milk on there. I remember those 3 times because it's the way we keep ourselves safe. We remember the things that went wrong so we can learn from them, except when we make them the preponderance of evidence when they're not.
Right. And that's the tendency that tends to happen. So that's what I think we're doing with EFT. When you want to call it the magic eraser or whatever you want to talk, we take those 3 and we work with them, because those are the ones that we made decisions about. Oh, you know what? I fall down too easily. You negotiated those steps a million times, but 3 times you fell. And so you decide that you're clumsy. Yeah. Right. And that's just,
and I love, and I love the fact you said magic eraser, that I actually, for a calendar year, my spiritual practice was I carried a pink eraser in my right front pocket. Because every time I reached into my pocket, my reminder was my work is to let go of a belief that no longer serves me. That was my only work, was just, and it was an idea that I got from Hulan Halilaki, the Ho'oponopono teacher. But it was just like literally for an entire calendar year, it was just my reminder. That's my only job, is to let go of the thing that no longer serves me, because it might have been true in an instant. Like, the other thing I think is really important is that we get really, really good at beating ourselves up for having these limiting beliefs, except for the fact what you pointed to earlier is I built a strategy in the moment to keep me safe.
Yes.
And the problem is not the strategy. The problem is the misapplication of the strategy today, when it is no longer like, it is appropriate that when I am on the beach that I have a shucker to shuck my oysters. That is the right tool in that context. It is unuseful for me to still have it in my hand when I'm making a grilled cheese sandwich.
Yeah. I mean, when I was a kid, my dad's passed on. I love my dad, but he was an angry dad when I was a kid. And
Yeah.
so I learned to be incredibly sensitive to the sound of steps coming down the stairs and how close to my bedroom door it was. You know, I mean, I became tuned into every sensory experience to keep myself safe. As an adult, I didn't even realize until it was pointed out to me as I used to drive, I'd be watching in every car, like I'd be staring at people and things and watching, and that kind of hyper vigilance that was just a strategy, but it was fine, like, to be safe in certain circumstances, but it got to be really annoying, and people were wondering, why am I staring at them? And it was really an unconscious behavior for keeping myself safe. That was no longer really working. That wasn't keeping me any safer. It was probably making it more dangerous because I wasn't watching what was in front of me on the road. So these strategies that we adopt, we need to honor that they had a really valid place at the time, but they're no longer serving us. And then how do we use the work and self-observation and the practices to be able to say, thank you so much for what you've served, but you're no longer serving me. I can create new strategies now.
Right tool, right context, wrong tool, wrong context. That's all it is. Just trying to figure out how we navigate that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's excellent. This has been wonderful. I appreciate the time and the inquiry and the conversation.
Well, Craig, I always appreciate your time. And a lot of folks don't know this behind the scenes, that Craig has been very instrumental in the last number of years in helping us to find new voices to share at this particular event. So Craig, we always appreciate the fact that you're sharing new resources with us so we can share them with the tapping world.
My joy. May this just keep growing and growing every year and getting bigger and bigger and better and more, have a greater impact. Thank you so much for the effort that goes into this, and all the other amazing presenters, because it truly is an amazing event.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, my friend, and I will talk to you real soon.
Thank you, Gene.
Awesome. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. As you look at the screen right now, you can see a link to the entire playlist of every single conversation for previous 24 hours of tapping. There are over 120 presentations waiting for you. And please consider supporting the amazing work of the Peaceful Heart Network.